Let's welcome in our QB1. We don't have any issues on Friday. We know who our quarterback is.
That's right.
And it is Tim Couch. What's up, Tim?
What's up, guys? How you doing today?
Tim, we're great, and we're happy to have you here. And before we get to the Browns, I got to ask about your guy, Will Levis, because I like what I've seen from this kid in the first two games. He plays with a lot. I hate to be cliche, but he plays with a lot of moxie. And he did not. I know he throws a pick at the end of the game. It's a tough spot. The clock's running down. But I really like what I've seen from him for the first 2 weeks. He's got way more to prove at this point. But they didn't lose that game because of him yesterday. I like him. And, when Burks went down at the end, that was tough. You could have used him on that last drive. But what's your take on it? I mean, how well do you know him? I assume you know him well. And what do you think of his first two games?
Yeah, I know Will really well. We got to be really good friends. We got to be really close while he was here at Kentucky, and we talk all the time. I talked to him, last week after his big game, his first game where he threw 4 touchdowns. I talked to him after the game and just congratulated him. And Will's a good player. In my opinion, he should have been a first-round pick. He played his last year at Kentucky, hurt the whole season, and in a bad situation. The offensive coordinator was only here for 1 year, so it was kind of a bad system for Will to be in. And like I said, he was playing injured that whole season. And Will's a tough guy. He's going to be out on the field whenever he can. He probably should have set out a lot of the season last year, but he probably hurt himself a little bit with some performances that he had trying to play through that injury. But he's shown so far in his first 2 games that he looks comfortable in the NFL. He looks like he belongs. He stands strong in the pocket. He made some really tough throws last night with guys right in his face, where you see he's able to just kind of flick the ball out there with that arm strength. He doesn't really have to step into these throws the way a lot of quarterbacks do. So he's got a unique skill set. He's got great leadership ability. He brings a lot of toughness to the position. And, I'm pulling for him. I hope he has a great career there in Tennessee. Hopefully they can get a little more talent around him. And, the offensive line is a little broken down right now. He's getting a lot of pressure, taking a lot of hits, and hopefully they can add a few more pieces on the outside for him to throw the ball to.
Man, he's a big, strong kid too.
He looked like he'd been lifting weights with you, Tim. It's crazy.
Yeah. Hey, he's a big dude, man. He really is. Yeah, we played golf, a few times while he was here at Kentucky. I took him out to play golf, and he'd never really played golf before. But he's just one of those guys. It's just such a natural athlete. He's picking up the golf club and just bombing it down the middle. He's hitting it past everybody in the group. And Will is he's a strong physical dude. He's got a lot of energy. He just brings a good moxie to the offense, to the position. Guys, I think, believe in Will. I think they rally around him, and he is definitely a big dude. He's probably 6'4", 240 or so. I mean, and built. He's ripped up. He's a great athlete, and he's got a bright future ahead of him, I think.
We've been talking, for it seems like every week about what we doing at quarterback, and you got the Cardinals coming up. You can look at it 2 ways. You can look at it and say, let's give Deshaun Watson another week, get ready for the Ravens if that's at all possible. Or you can look at it and say, well, look, Deshaun has not had an opportunity to play, didn't get the rust knocked off, so to speak, has not played against Tennessee. Maybe we use this as a way in order to get to see what he has in a tune-up game. Where do you stand on that? 1 more week of rest, or possibly getting him out there if he's healthy?
Yeah, I think it's a really tough spot, I think because, my initial reaction is let's get him out there against Arizona. Let's knock this rust off, because these next 2 games coming up after this are obviously extremely tough and extremely important games, for a playoff run. So, you got to go win those 2 games, and you need Deshaun, playing at his best. And it's hard to, sit out a few weeks. I know he played a few weeks ago against Indianapolis for a little bit, but, to go out there and play a whole game is a different situation. And, you want him, want him at his best. You want the rust knocked off, and I think this would be a great game to do it if he's healthy, But, that's all going to be on Deshaun and how his body's feeling, how the shoulder's feeling. You don't want him to rush it, but also you want him back out there, like I said, to get, to get ready for these next 2 games. So it's a tough situation that, only Deshaun, I think, really knows the answer. I think, after going through a week of practice and throwing the football, we've seen some clips of him throwing at practice where he looked like his old self. But how did the shoulder feel the next day? How did it feel after 2 days of throwing, after 3 days of throwing? Because this type of injury can linger on you. And, you just never know what's going to flare it up, whether it be, kind of consistent throwing over a few days, taking a hit like we saw in Indianapolis where it knocked him out of the game. So you never know what's going to set you back. But, hopefully they can make that decision, make the right decision. And, I would love to see him out there against Arizona and get ready for these next 2 games.
Speaking of Arizona, Tim, they got their own quarterback issues to try and sort through. would you rather, if as a young guy, as a young quarterback, would you rather have all week knowing you're going to be the starter, or do you want to just find out Friday, Saturday, okay, you're the guy where you don't have as much time to sort of overthink it?
Yeah, for me, I think it's more comfortable knowing that you're going to be the starter. Not only just kind of mentally, you're preparing yourself and you're getting ready to, whatever it takes to start a game in the NFL, for your preparation and everything else that goes into that. And just kind of knowing you're the guy the whole week long. You're taking all the reps in practice. You're getting all those, those reps throughout the week in the red zone and the blitz drills and everything like that. And just getting, being in there with the guys, getting used to, how the center, snaps the ball, how guys come out of routes, how receivers run certain routes, how guys, see blitzes, how they're breaking off side adjustments and things like that. So it just gets you a little more experience, a little more familiarity with the guys. And, so certainly for me, I think it's better to kind of know all week long. And there, there is, those cases where guys don't even know they're going to be the starter, like you said, and they throw them in there, hey, you're in, starter can't go. And you really don't have time to think about it. And sometimes that's good for guys too. But for me personally, I always like kind of having that preparation and that week leading up to get myself ready to go.
Tim, PJ Walker, they've won 2 of the 3 games he started, and could have very easily won the 3rd game in Seattle. But the turnovers are a massive problem right now. 1 touchdown and 6 turnovers in 3 games. When you're a quarterback who hasn't played a lot, is there anything the coaching staff can do to help you try to avoid those mistakes? Or in the end, you're on the field, you're your own man. There's nothing they can do. Can the organization help?
I think it's a little bit of both. Ultimately it comes down to the player. You're the one out there making that final decision. You got the ball in your hand. You decide when and where to throw it. So it comes down to the quarterback. You can teach a guy all week long. You try to put him in the best situations where, hey, let's don't force this, and it's situational football. It really is. And I think that comes with experience. You have to understand where you are on the field, what point of the game you're in, the down and distance, everything that factors into that as a veteran quarterback. When a play call comes into your helmet, you factor all those things in almost immediately. Okay, I got 3rd and 6. It's second quarter. I don't have to really force anything right here. If it's not there, I can either throw it away. A sack is not a bad play. And I think you just have to kind of, learn that as a young player that you don't have to force the issue all the time. For PJ, he's got a great defense. He's got the best defense in the league backing him up. So a punt sometimes it's not a bad thing at all. Go ahead and punt it. Don't put your defense in a bad situation with a turnover on a short field. So those are things you just have to learn, and hopefully we can see him start to make some better decisions and taking care of the football a little better the more experience that he gets.
Tim, I can't understand this for the life of me. Maybe I'm just a washed up fat boy defensive lineman that ate myself out of defensive end. Now I'm a tackle or a stand-up 3 technique. Why is it that we go 5 wide, right? And 5 wide takes a lot of execution. Like you got to read blitzes, and you identify who's coming. Maybe if you have a problem, you got a one-on-one with Jed Wills or a tackle outside. And on top of that, you got to read the defense and do it all in like under 2 seconds and then throw to the right person. It just seems like sometimes when we go 5 wide with PJ Walker or some of our younger quarterbacks, there seems to be some holding on to the ball and predetermining of throws. How difficult is it to really get into the gun in 5 wide, because you was doing it since you was in middle school, and diagnose what they're doing and run that, just run it up to a high standard?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. For some quarterbacks, it creates a really clear picture. For other quarterbacks who haven't really done a lot of that, I think it can be confusing because your clock does need to speed up. Like you said, you only have 5 guys in there to block. You're getting a lot of one-on-one situations in the pass rushing game. So the ball has to come out. But for me, I really liked it because, it really makes the defense kind of show their hand of what they're going to play. It's hard for them to disguise coverages when you're spread out with 5 wide all over the field, because these safeties have to get to where they're going. These corners have to, kind of show their hand. And then, also if you got a running back attached and he's lined up out wide, you got a linebacker walked out there with him, you're in man coverage. So, it kind of clarifies things for the quarterback really quickly. You can process information pre-snap a lot with the 5 wide situation. But like I said, it all comes down to personal preference for a quarterback. If you haven't played in that type of system before and all of a sudden they throw it on you, it can be a lot because the football does have to come out quick. There's no holding the ball. There's no going from one side of the field to the other with your read. It's pretty much, you're predetermining, who you're throwing to unless they take that away. It's a quick 1-2 read. And pretty much you're going to start scrambling and get out of there because you don't have time to hold it with 5 guys blocking like that. So I always loved it, but I've been doing it, like you said, since I was a kid. So it felt really comfortable to me. It painted a really clear picture for me being in the shotgun with the field spread like that. I really like that. But like I said, it's all personal preference for, some quarterbacks enjoy it, some don't, but it does present some different problems for you.
We're on to Arizona, but we haven't had a chance to talk to you since Seattle, so I'm just wondering your thoughts on the 3rd and 3 call to throw it, number one, and then number 2, the decision PJ made with the ball where he went. There was other guys looked like that were getting open if he could have held it for a second longer. Just your thoughts on the throw on 3rd and 3 and then PJ's decision where he went with it.
Yeah, I really didn't have that big of a problem with it. I think, it was a safe play call. It just kind of happened where the ball got batted up in the air, which, those things happen. A guy made a great play, he got a helmet on the ball and knocked it up in the air and, it got picked. But I think he was kind of going to the right place. He may have forced it a little bit. Like you said, if he could have held the ball, there was someone coming open on the backside for an easy first down. But I didn't really have an issue with the play call. I think, at that point, this is the NFL. You got an NFL quarterback out there. You think he can go out and throw, some quick game like that and convert a first down. And you have to put trust in those guys in those situations. And, I thought it was an okay call. I didn't, like I said, didn't have too big of an issue with it.
Tim, Pierre Strong got his first extended look, if you will. It was a 3-headed monster at running back. But we've seen a decent amount of Ford and obviously Kareem Hunt here before. It's the first time we've seen a lot of Pierre Strong. What did you think about his performance?
I thought he played well. Like I said, it's kind of a running back by committee right now with Nick being out. But they've shown they've got some talented guys. And, all those guys bring something a little different to the table. When they're in the game, and they can all, you can get them involved in the passing game as well. And, these guys are really good at, in the screen game. The Browns do a great job of throwing screens, getting the ball in these players' hands in space and, getting blockers out in front. So, I really like their group of backs. These guys are doing the best they can. They're doing a good job. They're being productive. They're moving the chains. They're creating some explosive plays, like I said, in the running game and also in the screen game as well. So I like all those guys, and I think they all bring a little something else, something a little different to the table.
Man, I'm going to steal this. I brought this up yesterday, and since you're the resident quarterback here on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, I was talking about it. My man Quincy Carrier came up with this thought process. He said, look, it's kind of difficult to put, Deshaun Watson on the field when you don't know whether or not he's going to be able to throw the ball with adrenaline in game time throws. And he came up with something I thought was very interesting. He said, what if you, before the game, put Deshaun Watson in shoulder pads, like all the equipment, and put him through a pro day, like where he goes out and they hit him with the brooms and he goes out and throws the intermediate and the deep routes and all the other stuff, and they simulate the pressure, making sure the ball is wet or whatever the case may be. And then if he could go through a pro day and be able to put his jersey back on it, then he can throw the football. I thought that was kind of interesting. Is that feasible? Is that too much throwing? If in a pro day circumstance that could aggravate it, or how well could you gauge from that process that he was ready to throw the football, comparing the two, because you've been through both of them?
Yeah, I think it'd be a good test. I don't know, exactly what all they could do, kind of pregame, but I think, there's probably ways, throughout the week in practice to, simulate those things, to kind of speed up the process a little bit, because I think you made a great point. It's those adrenaline throws, in a game that you just can't really, you don't get throughout the week in practice. Obviously, you're trying to go full speed, but, you're not live as a quarterback in practice. You're not going to take a hit. So, when the blitz is coming and you got to stand in the pocket, you're about to take a big hit and you got to throw a 16-yard in route over the middle to convert a big first down late in the game. Those are different type of throws. And, your body speeds up, your heart rate goes up, you're putting a lot more velocity and torque on the throw, trying to zip it in there between defenders. So those are really throws that you can only simulate when a game is in game action, live action when you know somebody's bearing down about to hit you. So I don't really know exactly how you could, kind of simulate that in a pro day situation or a practice situation. I think it's more just, those, put him out there and see, see if he can do it in a game. And I think really only Deshaun knows that. He's played this game for a long time. He's played at a high level. He knows how he feels and if he's capable of making those throws. If he can step it up from kind of practice speed to that game speed. And I think only Deshaun can really answer that question.
Tim, whose call is this on Sunday on whether Deshaun plays? We may have asked you this in the past, but if Deshaun says I'm good, does he go? And how much does ownership play a role in these types of decisions? Because I don't think that gets talked about enough. I know ownership was part of the reason Baker kept running out there last year because they needed to make a decision on him in terms of a long-term contract. But in a situation like this where the contract is settled, who has final say on whether Deshaun plays, and how does this work?
I would think it would come down, to the doctors and the coaching staff, and the communication there along with Deshaun. If the doctors have said, I think which they have said that he's cleared to play in their book, then it comes down to really Deshaun. I think that it's ultimately his decision. He's the one that's going to go out there and take those hits and make those type of throws that he has to make to win football games, and only he knows if he can do that. He's the one that's that feels that pain, and if he doesn't feel like himself, then he needs to relay that to the coaches because this is we've talked about it. This is going to be one of those injuries that kind of linger for Deshaun all year long, and it's just how you manage that. You're trying to get him through this season. You got some very tough games, some very important games coming up. So we need him out on the field, and so it's ultimately up to Deshaun. I think they all, as a group, they have to all be on the same page, communicating. This is how I feel. Well, this is how the medical results look, and then in the coaching staff, or can we count on to make it through an entire game, or is this going to be a situation where he's one hit away? Not even a devastating hit, a big hit, just a normal tackle where he lands on his shoulder and he's out of the game. Which makes it tough for a coaching staff to prepare all week to get a guy ready to go. So, I think it's just it takes a lot of communication, but I think ultimately in the end, at this point where he's kind of been cleared medically, I think it's all up to Deshaun and how he feels personally.
Tim, last thing, next week, your former teammate Kelly Holcomb will be on the show for the first time. Do you have a question that you feel we need to ask Kelly Holcomb?
Man, I wasn't ready for that question. That's a good one. I can see if we could ask him if he knows he can dye his hair. He's full gray right now, so tell him you guys can get him maybe a hair dye sponsorship or something like that for coming on the show.
I am 100% going to ask him that now. And there you go. Thanks, Tim. We'll talk to you next week. Have a great weekend.
Thanks,
All right.
Tim.
Appreciate it, guys. Have a good weekend.